been making shorts poking fun at Dinosaur with Stephen Fry, but shorts aren't enough. Dinosaur with Stephen Fry is the most incompetent, insincere, infuriating attempt at making a dinosaur documentary.
That is one big pile of shit.
Truly, the only value it has is the entertainment value there is to ripping it to shreds. So that's what this video is. The many ways in which Dinosaur with Stephen Fry was a total failure. A documentary is supposed to be informative. After watching a documentary, you should have gained some new knowledge. You should be enlightened with insight. But Dinosaur with Stephen Fry failed the fact check so badly that after watching each episode, you're left with more questions than answers. You can't trust a single fact that they try to feed you. This documentary will give you trust issues. It will make you lose faith in humanity. Like, I went into this documentary with an open mind. I was optimistic. But after watching the first episode, my spirit was broken. This series took away my innocence, my hope, my optimism. I'm not the same person I was before, and this video, it's part of the healing process. Not only is the paleontology inaccurate, like presenting the disproven Allosaurus hatchet theory as brand new, showing this as the Allosaurus skull, showing this as the Spinosaurus, but even in terms of basic science, physics, they have no grasp on reality. The Allosaurus survives being stomped on by the Diplodocus. The full weight of the Diplodocus crashes down on its chest, focused on the two front feet. And the Allosaurus, he's fine. He just needs a nap. It's even funnier when you take into consideration that right before this happened, they claimed the Diplodocus weighed 30 to 40 tons.
So this is an animal that's maybe 30 or 40 tons.
At its actual weight of 15 tons, the Diplodocus would have easily caved in the Allosaurus' chest cavity. But at 30 to 40 tons? That Allosaurus should have popped like a ripe pimple. They also do these random bro science experiments within each episode, and my favorite was claiming that steel teeth breaking a brick by biting down on it accurately represented what would happen if a T-Rex would bite down on a brick. Did they unearth a new T-Rex fossil that had a steel grill or something? Watching Dinosaur with Stephen Fry is like going to class, but the professor is the village idiot. They're giving misinformation, but from a place of authority, which will fool unsuspecting viewers into believing that Allosaurus weighed 15 tons and that this is what a Stegosaurus looked like. Because it's on TV, it's hosted by a celebrity, they're bringing in experts from the Natural History Museum, it all loans this air of, we know what we're talking about. A dead man once said,
"With great power comes great responsibility."
Channel 5, who produced Dinosaur with Stephen Fry, took no responsibility at all. They did not do their due diligence. They delivered a documentary with the educational value of a 5-minute crafts TikTok, but brought in enough people whose name starts with Doctor that they thought they could get away with it. And this is the one disclaimer this series will get in defense of itself. It's not all wrong, but too much of it is wrong, enough to completely lose its credibility. Basically, whenever they get something wrong, it's wrong. Duh. But when they get something right, it's unreliable. You have to be skeptical of everything they say and do the fact check that they didn't, which makes the documentary as a whole completely worthless. Because after watching this, you still have to do all of your own homework, so you would have been better off just going to Google yourself and looking up the most recent research papers. Something most people obviously aren't going to do. Based on the many videos out there ridiculing Dinosaur with Stephen Fry, you might think, hey, no harm done, nobody fell for it. But that's just the vocal part of the educated dinosaur community. There's gonna be a minority of people, perhaps even a majority of people, like kids and casual adult viewers, who are going to be repeating some absolute nonsense that they were fed by this documentary at like the next school trip or the next birthday party where they get seated next to crazy Uncle Dave and have to fill the silence so Dave doesn't go on a paranoid political rant or something. Dinosaur with Stephen Fry failed as a documentary because people who know about dinosaurs know the show was predominantly
A turd?
yes, and people who don't know about dinosaurs, science, and lack common sense, let's be honest, that's more people than we are comfortable admitting, they have been misinformed by the documentary. Stephen Fry was the main reason why I was optimistic about the series, and the producers at Channel 5 were acutely aware of this. There is a reason why the series is called Dinosaur with Stephen Fry. He's the bait. He's the big-name celebrity that is supposed to reel in viewers. Stephen Fry is a well-known and generally beloved actor/comedian. He can be pretty amusing. He is entertaining to watch. He brings none of that into this documentary. He's not acting well, and he is never intentionally funny. The only times the show does get funny is when it's just the perfect storm of stupid and you can't help but laugh at it. Dinosaur with Stephen Fry doesn't make jokes, it is the joke. In my opinion, Stephen Fry failed to earn his paycheck, because the sad reality is probably that most of the budget went straight into his pocket. His salary was almost certainly the biggest expense. It shows. It's just apparent that everything else had to be done with pennies they found under Stephen Fry's couch cushions. He was paid a lot and he delivered the bare minimum. Throughout the 4 episodes, Fry has a very oafish presence. I think he struggled with the green screen, the concept, and the script just as much as we did as the viewers. I also don't understand why they have him espousing information one half of the time, talking like he knows what he is talking about, and then the other half of the time he turns to the experts because all of a sudden he has absolutely no inkling about what's going on. In the 2nd episode, he confidently states that the Utahraptor is obviously a meat eater, looking at its teeth. Literally a few minutes later, the expert walks on screen and Fry point blank asks him,
"How do you know that it's a meat eater?"
to which the expert replies,
They are not teeth for eating plants.
and then Stephen Fry acts surprised in reaction to that. Like, whoa, you blew my mind. You are so smart. I could have never figured that out on my own. It makes no sense at all. His failure as a host is so painful, all the more when you think about other dinosaur documentaries and how classic the hosts were. Walking with Dinosaurs, Sir Kenneth Branagh. Prehistoric Park with Nigel Marven, who achieved god-tier status in the dinosaur community and is still sought after, appearing in Prehistoric Kingdom and Forgotten Bloodlines. Prehistoric Planet with Sir David fricking Attenborough. Those series were great and their hosts were great. Dinosaur with Stephen Fry does a disservice to dinosaurs and to Stephen Fry. Dinosaur with Stephen Fry boasted a unique approach to the dinosaur documentary with how they brought their host and experts back in time to come face to face with dinosaurs. Aside from the obvious fact that they weren't the first to have this idea, they did attempt to do it differently, conceptually and technically, but they completely botched it. There is no internal logic to the concept. When Nigel Marven went back in time for Prehistoric Park and Sea Monsters, which was one of my favorites, he interacted with the animals. The animals were aware of him because he was there. And that was part of the fun and part of the immersion. Dinosaur with Stephen Fry inexplicably drops people into the prehistoric past and is asking you to believe that they are standing next to actual dinosaurs. It's not this meta thing where they acknowledge to the audience, hey, this is just a green screen presentation. No, the gimmick is, look at me, I'm standing next to an Allosaurus. Wow! But the dinosaurs are not aware of the presence of these tasty humans. The dinosaurs completely ignore Fry and the experts they bring in and just awkwardly stand next to them like a poodle being judged at a dog show. It feels so awkward and out of place. It makes the gimmick just fall completely on its ass. It just becomes totally unbelievable because the animals themselves don't believe that the actors are there. So why would we believe it? Especially when you throw in the bad green screen, but we'll get back to that later. Also, they randomly built a deck up in a tree. It's just there all of a sudden to give Stephen a different perspective of Diplodocus doing behavior that frankly stands on uncertain ground, if you can excuse the pun. They don't commit to their own concept of going back in time, and it just shows how little thought went into this entire production. And you have to wonder why they even went with this approach, because the awful green screen draws all the more attention to the technical shortcomings of the production. So why not just have Stephen Fry do voiceover only and have him pop in for the bro science experiments that are part of every episode? The only explanation I can think of is that they were just antsy to get as much screen time out of Fry as possible. Don't turn off the TV, Stacey. We have Stephen Fry. Look, isn't he jolly? Isn't he funny? Don't you like him? Don't you want to watch more of this? No. Just no. I'm not talking about wokeness here. What I mean is, it's 2023 and the dinosaurs in your dinosaur documentary are Allosaurus, Diplodocus, T-Rex, Triceratops. These are the most covered species ever. All the more egregious because, unlike what they claimed, they don't actually have any new information about any of them. Unless you count wrong information as new information. If they had something groundbreaking and new to say about T-Rex, that would have been fine. But they don't. They're just rehashing old stuff that we've already been told 20 years ago, and that 10 years ago we were told was wrong. Why didn't they pick more unique, different species? Watching the episodes, I felt like they were taunting us with these tiny sections in the middle of each episode where they briefly mention other species from around the world. Species that don't get nearly as much attention in dinosaur media. Species that, if they did do their research correctly, which is a big if, granted, they could have actually brought something new and interesting to the table. Instead, we're going back to Allosaurus hatchet theory and spending way too much time on the T-Rex was a scavenger nonsense, even though, thankfully I guess, the show itself does acknowledge that scavenging was just part of what T-Rex did, like most carnivores. It was also an active hunter. But they just go so hard on the scavenger shit, and they had us in the first half, not gonna lie. I just wish they'd gone for different species, but instead they went with the safe, obvious choices. They felt like they had to tick a couple of boxes. From scripting to editing to production, Dinosaur with Stephen Fry fails on all accounts. The script was a first draft written by someone who doesn't know how to script and doesn't know anything about dinosaurs. After that first script, it was never proofread, it was never edited. They didn't just hit print on that first draft, they carved it in stone. They were like, this is it, can't change it now. Which led to the infamous Allosaurus weighs 2.5 tons. No, Allo weighs 15 tons. But Diplodocus weighs 15 tons. No, Diplodocus weighs 30 to 40 tons. And the funny thing about the Allosaurus and Diplodocus weight incident is that it was totally avoidable. Not only because Dr. Susie Maidment is supposed to be an expert and is supposed to have known better, but also because there was no point to her stating the weight of the animals. Stephen Fry had already given us an accurate estimation of their weight earlier in the episode. The repetition of the weight is completely redundant and happened to be a total blunder on top of that as well. If there had been any quality control on this documentary, someone could have just tapped the editor on the shoulder and tell them to cut out the part where the expert says the completely wrong weights. But nobody with any knowledge of dinosaurs whatsoever watched these episodes before giving it the green light to be aired. In fact, I'll go one step further. I feel kind of hesitant to blame the editor because he's watching an expert say something in the area of their expertise, but the editor still should have realized, hey, this is not the same as this part with Stephen Fry that I just cut and pasted together. I'm gonna bring in my superiors. We're gonna have to make a couple of calls. We're gonna have to fact check this. None of that happened. They didn't care, I guess. They just wanted to crank it out. No effort went into this at all. There are also discrepancies between the script and what is happening on screen, which led to hilarious contradictions like,
Then you've got the long, stiffened tail as well.
But there are no flowers. They haven't evolved yet. And no grass.
We have these 2 rows of alternating plates. And then at the end of the tail, we have these 4 big spines.
Now those clips I edited. It's footage from one part of an episode with audio from literally the same episode just a few minutes before or after. But let me give you an unedited example of how what they're saying contradicts what they're showing.
We have these 2 rows of alternating plates that stick out very slightly from the midline. And then at the end of the tail, we have these 4 big spines. And they would have been quite a fearsome weapon, that the stegosaur would have been able to swing its tail and actually impact bone with its spikes.
Throughout the series, species, genus, and family names are treated as interchangeable, and they structured their episodes to chronologically take them through time, but they completely botched it. They just ignore the Triassic and skip straight to Allosaurus and Diplodocus. Then they spent 3 episodes in the Cretaceous, 2 of which in the late Cretaceous, going over the same species. And they randomly do a side-by-side comparison of Allosaurus and T-Rex, and Triceratops and Diplodocus? Why are you anachronistically mixing up dinosaurs here? The meager informational value of these comparisons does not stack up to how confusing that is for casual viewers. They also mention Pangea every single episode, even though Pangea had already started breaking up by the time they set their first episode in. Pangea is of no relevance whatsoever in later episodes which take place in the Cretaceous, but they still talk about Pangea. Seriously, it feels like one of the producers clicked "surprise me" on Google and ended up on the Wikipedia page for Pangea where he just had his mind blown. Whoa, a supercontinent? That's hot. And since then, he's been obsessed, because he just can't get enough of that young, sexy supercontinent. Like one of your besties that randomly brings up her crush in any conversation. It's like a toddler who learned a new thing and wants to tell everyone. Twice. It's like a Jehovah's Witness knocking on your door and being like, "Hi, do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior, Pangea?" And then, of course, infamously, the decision to use ARC models. ARC, known for its paleo-accurate designs. Yes, this looks like a perfectly normal Stegosaurus. It has to be said, the CGI is bad. Now, if the CGI was the only problem, you would not have heard a peep from me. Channel 5 is old school mainstream media. It's just a bunch of boomers who don't understand technology and don't have the context for the right resources in their dusty Rolodex.
How do you do, fellow kids?
So I saved the CGI for last, because in my opinion, of all the many things they did wrong, this one is the least egregious. But it's also probably the most hilarious one. It's honestly ludicrous when you compare it side by side with something like Prehistoric Planet. I don't think this section has to drag on because I've been showing clips throughout this entire review. You've seen how bad it is.
Magic.
Dinosaur with Stephen Fry is just through and through a poorly produced attempt at a documentary made by people who don't have a passion for dinosaurs. Like, the experts they brought on, they're fine, whatever, except you, Susie, we will never forget.
Allosaurus here is 15 tons.
But the producers, the editors, the animators, none of them know about dinosaurs, and none of them give enough of a crap to educate themselves on dinosaurs to ensure that they can make a good dinosaur documentary. So really, it's made by people who don't even have a passion for their own craft. Because what kind of documentary maker can't be bothered to actually do their homework on the subject of their documentary? Before you leave, give the video a like and subscribe to be one of 150,000 people who love dinosaurs, but hate Dinosaur with Stephen Fry.